Well, I feel like it was before I even started thinking about the possibility of having children someday that I started receiving parenting advice from friends and family and strangers on the street, right? And most of it actually contradicted one another. There's so many different ideas and opinions about how we grow our children, right? Some would say, don't coddle your child too much. And the others would say, you can never coddle your child too much. Some would say, if they're crying, it's okay to put them down. And others would say, don't ever let them cry, ever. Even when it came to things like fruits and vegetables, how many times have I heard, make sure you give them the vegetables first, because if you give them the fruit, they'll never, ever eat vegetables the rest of their lives. Apparently, this is a thing. I don't know. There's so many different pieces of advice. And between what everybody was telling me and what I was reading about in all those what to expect when you're expecting types of books, my brain was absolutely full, and I was exhausted, and I didn't even have a kid yet. There is, though, one piece of advice that I received from everyone, and everyone agreed on it. And it's not even advice that I received just when I was expecting or when my kids were little. It's one that I still get to this day. And that is, cherish the time you have with them, because before you know it, they'll be grown. And I can tell you today, as the mother of a 22, 18, and 13-year-old, they were right. Cherish the time you have with them now, because before you know it, they'll be grown. Now, of course, that is also the hardest piece of advice to hear and to listen to when you're parenting a toddler who's throwing things at you, or maybe an older child who's learned how to push buttons with just the tone of a voice, perhaps. But nonetheless, we need to stay in those moments and enjoy them for what they are, truly experience them. But whether it's those buttons that our kids are pushing or just the general busyness of our lives, we find it very difficult to do that. All of us, no matter what we're going through in our lives, have those moments that are just fleeting. When it feels like the world is going past us in a whirlwind of activities and emotions and work life and home life and all the rest. So let me ask you all a question this morning. This week, how many of you have said one of these two phrases? Either I'm so busy or I'm so tired. Anybody said either one of those? That's right, even those without hands up, I see you, right? Now let me ask you, how many of you have said both of those statements more than once this week? Yeah, I thought so. I'm not even going to bother to ask how many of us have said them multiple times every day. I'll leave that one alone. But the thing is, that sheer number of those hands that we just saw up in the air ought to tell us something. That perhaps if I'm so busy and I'm so tired have become this refrain in our lives instead of a once in a while kind of thing, there should be something here to pay attention to. We live in a world that is constantly pressuring us to be busier and busier and busier. And sometimes that comes with parenting, but some more times it's work, or it's relationships, or it's in our hobbies. Somehow we have come to believe that success or this badge of honor can be given to us if we just work more hours during the week. And somehow we've convinced ourselves that we can only find success by working ourselves to the bone. And somehow we have equated our children's success in what they're doing, whether it be sports or arts or anything else, with our own level of success, as that seems to be a reflection on us. And so we put those pressures, we hand those pressures down, even when we don't mean to do that. And all of this takes its toll on us. When we say we're tired, we're not just saying that we are physically tired and ready to go to bed. We are admitting that our minds are exhausted and our spirits are dry. We only need to look around for a moment or two to also see that this affects the way we are as community. All of this takes its toll on the way that we are able to build communities, the ways and abilities we have to react or respond to one another with compassion or with empathy, the way that we view healing and peace in our world. All of this is, in a word, unsustainable. We cannot thrive in a world where we are constantly being pressured to go and go and go. We are depriving ourselves of the abundant life that God came to this world to give us. And the worst thing about all of this is that we are doing it to ourselves. Now, you might be wondering about now how it is that we are talking about a playful summer. Play seems like a really great thing to talk about, but I'm up here harping on about being busy and being tired. But here's the thing. Rest is actually essential for us to be able to play. When we are tired and exhausted and busy and feel that we don't have time to do anything, that is when we are unable to rest in the freedom God brings us. And true godly play, holy play, as we've been talking about, is essential for our lives, but it cannot happen unless we free ourselves of that go, go, go mentality and always thinking about the productivity and the next thing on our to-do list. So, of course, in the church, we refer to this kind of rest as Sabbath. And Sabbath is something that God literally commands us to do. And while we often think about the commandments as things that restrict us, actually, each of the commandments is one of God's gifts to us. We mistakenly think that we are sustaining the world and all the things that we are doing, but Sabbath reminds us that that is not our job, that it is God who sustains us and God who continues to provide for us, pouring blessings upon blessings out on us. So when we feel guilty or shame for taking time to rest in Sabbath, we only need to remember that God requires us to do this. And that is our permission to just stop. In Exodus 31, verse 13, God asks Moses to say this to the Israelites: "You must observe my Sabbaths. This will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come, so that you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy." So that you may know that I am the Lord. This is, of course, the third commandment, to keep the Sabbath holy. And it is repeated by God numerous times to the Israelites throughout the Old Testament. And when Jesus comes, he reminds us of this as well. We all know that Jesus doesn't come to us and say, here's a few coping strategies for stress management, right? And God doesn't, or Jesus doesn't come to us and say, you really ought to have at least 12 things on your schedule each and every day. Here's how to keep putting more on. But what God does say to us through Jesus is, don't worry. Do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, or about your body, what you will wear? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life? Do not worry. The work will get done. Do not worry. The opportunities will still be there. Do not worry. Just rest. Rest in the knowledge that you will be sustained by our God of goodness. When I was growing up, I actually thought that Sabbath was like the worst thing ever. Because in my mind, somehow I had understood Sabbath to mean that you could go to church, but then you couldn't do anything the rest of the day except stare at some wall and be bored out of your mind. Now, and it's not even like that's what my parents made us do on Sundays. That's far from the case. But it was this construct that I had understood, or perhaps we should say misunderstood, about what Sabbath truly is. I've come to understand it quite differently now. That Sabbath doesn't actually mean do nothing. And it also doesn't mean here's your day to catch up on laundry and all the other errands that you need to do. Rather, Sabbath is the way that we are able to just live freely in God's love. It is what we do when we disconnect from the frenzy of our everyday lives in order to connect with God again. There's a pastor, Wayne Mueller. He's a pastor, a therapist, an all-around spiritual, educational person. And in his book titled Sabbath, which I would commend to any of you who'd like to read more about this, he writes, "Sabbath is the presence of something that arises when we consecrate a period of time to listen to what is most deeply beautiful, nourishing, or true. It is time consecrated with our attention, our mindfulness, honoring those quiet forces of grace or spirit that sustain and heal us. It is time consecrated for God when we listen for God in our lives." Maybe for you, that means Sabbath is spending time in God's creation as you garden. Or maybe it could be that you take care of your body and remember that this body has been created for us by God by going on long walks or spending time in the gym. Or maybe for you, it means just reading a book so that we can put away the constancy of technology once in a while. Sabbath doesn't have to be rigid. It doesn't have to be done alone. It doesn't have to be done with other people. Sabbath is whatever it is that brings you the ability to quiet your mind and see God's grace for you once again. So really, Sabbath becomes whatever godly play that means the most to you. How can you go out and spend time in holy play, knowing it is God who frees you to do this? Whatever it is, I hope that while you do it, you are in that moment. And whether it's parenting or not that goes by so fast, we know it already goes by too fast. So let's not make it go any faster. Thanks be to God for the gift of Sabbath and for our godly play. Amen.